When I had hinted at Tech Yes City that we were rolling around in the new Tech Yes Mobile and it was a Kia Stinger, you guys requested that I take a look at this thing and talk about all things cars. So this is going to be a video that's definitely going to be off the beaten track in terms of we're not really going to be talking about PC hardware at all, but what we're going to be talking about is some different kind of hardware, the real deal right here. And why did I buy this car and what do I like about it? And I gotta say already, this is just really weird because we're at this place on the Gold Coast, about 10 minutes from where I'm at, and I've already seen an echidna, which is extremely rare, and there's already been a bird surfing on top of my car. Such an enigmatic place for an enigmatic car. This is just the weirdest intro ever. Hopefully it doesn't do a turd on my door. Let's check out the Kia Stinger anyway. If you are sick and tired of forgetting those passwords, then today's video sponsor Dashlane is the solution for you. Logging into a Blizzard account once in a while to game, but forgot that password? Dashlane has got you. Need to make a strong password for a new Reddit troll account? Not a problem, Dashlane will remember that for you too. Though on top of all that, Dashlane can remember and autofill shipping details, passport numbers if you are traveling, your ex-girlfriend's credit card number, the list goes on. Though, what about safety? It holds all my passwords, surely it can't be safe, right? Well, here's where Dashlane encrypts all your data end to end and is a secure cloud-based service. So all you need to worry about is remembering your master password and Dashlane will do the rest. You can also use it across multiple devices and there is even a private VPN built in. Now, if you use the link dashlane.com/techyescity, then you can get Dashlane completely free on your first device. And if you decide you want to upgrade to a more premium option, then you can get 50% off using the link and coupon code in the description below. Easy. Let's get back to the video. Welcome back to Tech Yes City, and straight away with this car, we've got 280 kilowatts roughly at your disposal. And this is a rear-wheel drive car, at least the edition or the GT edition that's sold in Australia. Now the thing I like about this car already, out of the factory, it's incredibly quick and it's tuned for 91 octane fuel. And that's the lowest grade of fuel in Australia. So basically, if you want to, you can add an exhaust, clean up the air intake a little bit, add a custom aftermarket solution, and also tune it for 98 octane, and you've suddenly got a lot of extra power at your disposal. But the problem there is that for me personally, I'm getting used to this car still, so I'm not even gonna think about tuning it for at least another 6 months to even a year, because it's already really quick as it is. This thing can take off at the lights, and it's even got things like launch control built in, so you essentially get ready for a quick start off the lights if you wanna beat your competition. Now, one thing about the Stinger is not like anything I used to have where my previous car was a 124 Abarth and my friend's car is an 8.6. A lot of you guys always ask us about the 8.6. And that's actually my friend who's filming at the moment, Shannon. He sometimes on his day off, he likes to hang out. He's a big car enthusiast. And the 8.6 and even the Abarth 124, they're cars that, although they aren't as quick on a straight line as the Stinger, they will beat the Stinger a lot of the times around the circuit. So that's one weakness of the Stinger inherently. It's a bigger car. When you think of how long this car is, you can think of maybe a Toyota Camry 2020 model or 2019 model. So it is quite a big car, but that said, that's the reason I really wanted to get this car in the first place, because I needed a lot more space when I was doing my used hustle. Especially with the 124 Spider, I couldn't fit really anything in that car. And even then I had a lot of times had to borrow my friend Shannon's 8.6 just to do parts hunts because we could fit more PC parts in that car. But the Stinger, you can fit quite a lot of PC parts in this thing. It's a really beautiful car. So when it comes down to the Stinger, it's luxurious inside. I even opted for the red leather edition where there's the black, there's the white, I think, if you get the midnight blue exterior. Mine's the, obviously, as you've seen in some of the B-roll, the white exterior with the snow pearl tint. And I just love this color because it brought out all the features on the car. I noticed some of the darker colors wouldn't have brought out the features as much, where the feature set's pretty much the same on every single color on the GT. I think this white really brings out like the moon roof, the sun, which is also a sunroof too, and it also helps out bring out things like the wheels and the mag contrast to the car. So I really loved this color straight out of the get-go and I fell in love with it straight away. Now another thing is too, when you open the bonnet, it's got these strut bars that hold out, very clean engine inside. The boot is another favorite feature too, which is automatically controlled. You just hold down the button. You can even set that to the sensor where if you stand behind it long enough, it'll just open up automatically. I decided to turn this off because it can get, I guess it can miss and pop off when you don't want it to pop off. Though, let's go down history lane now, because this is easily the best car I have owned in terms of what the history of my cars has been. When it all first started off for tech, yes, I was driving a Holden Commodore. And this was like, we call it the bogandore in Australia, because these old things were just pieces of crap. And it was a piece of crap. It broke down on me so many times. And then eventually I was lucky that a dealer gave me a decent trade-in value for it, where my next car after that was a 180SX. This is where I started to fall in with love with Japanese import cars. They were amazing. They were turbo, they were fast, they looked cool, they had the cool exhaust notes. And we'll tie that back to the Stinger. This exhaust note in itself is a very unique sound. If you hear another Stinger taking off, you'll know straight away that that's a Stinger, because it's just got that awesome unique note that's not really reminiscent of Nissan or Toyota or anything like that. So I really like what they've done with the engine and the exhaust note. Of course, if you add a turbo back exhaust, you can make this thing sound like a really cool exotic. I have heard only a few YouTubers out there that have done it, or a few guys out on YouTube that have shown these videos where they've got the exhaust note perfect. So if I did do it, I'd want to do it like turbo back. However, inside the car right now, you'll probably hear that it's very quiet, and that's one thing I love about the Stinger. You pretty much have this sound deadening that works extremely well for people inside the car. And it's great for me because I'm using the hands-free a lot, talking to people, making calls here, there, and everywhere while I'm driving, and you can control that off the phone itself, or again with Android Auto. So you can hear people clearly, they can hear you really well. The mic for the actual hands-free is beautiful too. People will be able to hear you crystal clear. And then the speaker system that they've included is very nice too. So this has got a little bit of bass, not too much. It's got good enough sound that you won't want to really go out and get an aftermarket sound system. And this is coming from a guy who's quite enthusiastic about his audio, especially while he's driving. To continue on with the cars that I used to own, since a lot of you guys are curious about that as well, we went from the 180SX to then jumping into an R32 Skyline GT. Now this is where I started to delve into cars even more. And of course, with cars, you guys, if you haven't experienced cars enough yet, you'll know that they are one of the biggest money sinkholes a man can face. And I'm saying this just because this is the way it is. And so when people start complaining about computer parts, say a graphics card costing a couple of $100 or a PC costing $2,000, I'm like, man, you might want to just start jumping into car enthusiast forums and finding out how much some of the boys there are spending, because trust me when I say, enthusiast PC tech is much cheaper than enthusiast cars. You will be spending so much money. So basically, when I got my R32, I was dropping like an exhaust on it, I got some wheels on it, and I just ended up starting like going through that boy racer stage. And the problem is, yeah, I'm checking the speed limit, so there's the Stinger just letting me know. Like, it's got these voice commands that, again, like we heard before, it just tells you, it's like your little friend. But anyway, the Skyline. That was a car that had low compression because I got it with pretty high Ks. And now one thing about the JDM imports, or I guess any engine for that matter, but especially turbos, is when the compression gets low, man, you're gonna get floored. Like, people are just gonna laugh at you. I remember when I had my 32 Skyline, the compression was pretty low because I was like, I lost to this Holden Astra. And I'll never forget, this guy in the Holden Astra, that was the 2-liter turbo, to be fair. He was just looking and just laughing through his window at me. And I had never felt so insecure in my life. And after that, I then saved up more money, traded the 32 Skyline for a Soarer. Now the Soarer, that was the twin turbo, and very similar, I'm gonna say, like in terms of the cars that I've had the most similar to the Stinger, the Soarer would be, even though it's a 2-door versus this being a 4-door hatch. The Soarer had the digital dash. This has the digital dash. It has the digital heads up. I think the Soarer didn't have the heads-up display, but the digital dash is one thing that I love. I don't know why so many cars don't include a digital dash. It's just one of those things I don't understand, but they've done it. Kia have done it. They've given you the ability, of course, to have the manual dash displays if you want them too. But back to the Soarer, and this is where another similarity between the Stinger and the Soarer is they were both boats, both heavy cars. And now, one thing about Australia is, in my opinion, you do want a heavier car. Generally on the roads, a heavier car is going to be safer, because if some young boy racer crashes into you, you're you got a higher chance of not getting heavily injured, or severely injured. So that's one thing I love about the heavier cars. I did crash the Soarer. I had a bad accident and I came out with a scar on top of my head. Now, had I been driving a smaller car, things could have been different. You might not even be watching this video to this date. But that heavier car thing generally comes with, in the case of a sports car, a lot of power behind the engine. And you've got that heavier sort of torque feel, which the Stinger and the Soarer did share in common. Of course, the Stinger's faster with a 3.3 litre twin turbo, but it still shared that similarity. And the Soarer was really the first car that I got where I'd started sort of doing those, nice takeoff from the lights, and I was winning races, man. The Soarer was it. That was the first car that I'd really said, hey, I'd made the right choice here. And after that, I'd also fell in love with Toyotas. Though then I became a uni student, and for some reason, I guess I just needed money. So I sold my Soarer and I got a Toyota Corona, because after Toyota, again, I had this brand loyalty to Toyota. Now the Corona, this was like some old banger I got for $1,000, and the Corona was phenomenal. Like, this thing would not stop. It just kept running. I remember we had some temperature problems one time. We just took the thermostat off and then it kept running. It got to the point where we put so many kilometers on it that the door fell off from, I think it was rust, and then we got a new door for it, and it just kept rolling. So the engine just never gave out, and that's why I love the Corona. But then after that, I went to Japan. So after the Corona, this was when I'd finished university. I'd I'd broken up with a girl. Like, it was a pretty serious thing. Broken up with a girl. I'm not going to say her name or anything like that, but we broke up. I met a Japanese girl just off the rebound, and she brought me over to Japan after I finished uni. And then after that, I just fell in love with Japan. They had, at the time, Australia had terrible internet. I mean, Australia still does have terrible internet, but Japan had like 100 megabits per second downloads in like 2007, 2008. And I just loved like the high tech culture. It was really, really good for a young dude coming up. And so my first car over in Japan was a RX-7 FD, because of course JDM cars in Japan, especially if they're used and especially if they've got more than 100,000 kilometers on the clock, they're really cheap. So I got this silver FD and I absolutely loved this thing. It was quick. And the FD was a car that I loved in terms of its looks and its performance. It was a real like cockpit sports car kind of car. But one thing I didn't like about that car was easily the rotor motor itself. This thing was so unreliable. It would break down so much. And that's one thing about owning a rotor, is that they require a lot of maintenance. But of course, they are a lot of fun. Twin turbo, that thing was quick. Then I brought that back to Australia because you had the 1-year import where if you owned it in Japan for a year, you could bring it back without paying all these heavy duties, and you could generally get it back as it was without having to modify it back to stock condition or anything like that. So brought that back, sold it, made a bit of profit on it, then went back to Japan again, and the next car I got was a Subaru Liberty B4. And these were going, in Japan at the time, these were going for like $3.5 grand. And the Liberty again was another car that I just fell in love with. This was a beautiful car, 4 doors, it had the room, it had the speed. But another thing about the Liberty was it was a perfect balance between, I guess, being fast on the street, but also cornering really fast, but still having more room in the car to fit more than 2 people in, and also having a proper boot space. So the Liberty in that respect was one of my favorite all-rounder cars. Now, so another thing I did to the Liberty was I actually crashed it one time because my back was out, and my ex was like, you got to take me to a wedding. You have to take me. I told her, like, look, my back's out. I do not want to drive at all. And she just kept insisting that I take her to this wedding. So I dropped her off, and literally like 2 minutes after I dropped her off, like I had a like sudden like spasm because my back was so sore, and I just crashed right up the back of someone. And that ended up costing me like $4,000, so it was quite expensive. It was a big mistake. Even though you got insurance, these guys request like all OEM parts, like original parts, and that's when they take you to town. So I got taken to town, but then after that I fixed the Liberty up. I got a new front bar on it, I got some new mags on it, and another thing I did too at the time was I got some suspension. Now this is going to tie into perfectly with the Kia Stinger here, because the suspension I got was this HKS kit, and it had these purple springs on it. That's the edition I got. And I absolutely love this suspension. It was a sort of like it was soft, but you could still feel all the bumps, and it was pretty firm. I guess soft and firm if you were to describe the suspension. Now, the Kia Stinger in sports mode is exactly like this suspension. So you've got two different modes of suspension on the Kia Stinger where you can change between comfort, which I usually drive around in, but then if you change it to sports mode, it'll tighten up the seat, tighten up the suspension, and of course make the engine more responsive. So I love the different modes you can change in between this car, but the suspension is one thing that I love in sports mode because it reminds me of that HKS suspension that I had in my Subaru Liberty. Now, fast forward that Subaru Liberty, about a year and a bit later, I again did a personal import, brought it back to Australia, flipped it, made some money, then I went back to Japan again. Now this is where things got a bit crazy because I got in Japan another FD. This was a white one. But one thing about this FD was it was a complete lemon. The guy who sold me it, I think he hosed me down, even though I didn't pay that much for it. I pretty much got this thing and it was just, it would not start sometimes, it was breaking down. It was just one of those nightmares. If you guys have worked on cars enough, you'll come across either a car that you own or a mate owns, or you'll hear a story where a car is just not working properly. You've done everything. You've gone through the electricals, you've cleaned, even sometimes you can even change the engine on these cars, and they just don't work properly. And that's exactly what this FD that I got, the second one I got, was. It was just like one of those cars that was so unreliable that I just reflipped it. And the good thing was I got almost back what I paid for it. I just said like the car doesn't run properly, and I guess the guy who bought it liked the look of it because it did have a nice body kit and mags on it, and it was in pretty good condition on the exterior. So he wanted to rebuild the engine, I think. And so a lot of drifters over in Japan will just get cars that look really nice and they're in good condition, but they got high Ks and crap engine, and they'll just rebuild the engine or replace the engine themselves. That's a very common thing. But anyway, that was the last sports car that I'd owned in Japan. That was the finishing finale of the sports cars in Japan, because after that I'd met my ex-wife. We were sort of getting serious and we had a little boy, and then I got a little family car. We'd got a Toyota, I didn't even, Yaris I think it was. It was just like this red station wagon. I even forgot the name of it. It just wasn't important to me as a car. It was just like a family banger car that didn't really hold much meaning. But it was good value. I mean, we got this car for like $3,000 and it was like 2006 model, and it had like only 80,000 Ks. One of the best value cars I'd ever got in my life, because when you buy a car in Japan, you actually get what's called chiken, or 2 years registration with it. So that was $3,000 for everything. The car, the registration, and it was just such a reliable car. But then I also had a little car on the side. It was the Suzuki Alto, I think it was, and I got this banger for $1,000 because my ex would need the car. I'd need the banger just to drive around and do my thing. So you may have seen that on the channel sometimes, but then I had owned that for 2 years, and that thing, because I'd owned it for 2 years, I just drove it into the ground because it was so cheap. It's like, what's the point of servicing this thing when it only cost you $900? So I didn't even service it, just 2 years drove it straight, and then eventually it just broke down. I just pretty much sold it to the wreckers. And after that, I got this little van. You guys saw that on the channel. I had this little like banger van that I had on the channel. That was the last car I'd owned in Japan. Now, that was a tough phase in my life when I'd got that car. Like, I was really doing it tough. I just got divorced. I got so frustrated that I pulled the steering wheel off that thing, and then I had to refix it all. And then I ended up selling it for about half the price I paid because I had to sell it quickly because I was leaving Japan. And so then I got back to Australia, and my brother talked me into a Holden Astra 2-liter turbo. Now this Holden Astra was, I guess it was good at first. Like, it was a quick car. It was a nice, cool little banger car. But then before I went to sell this car, it catastrophically, and I say catastrophically, broke down on me. And I absolutely was so frustrated because I had lined up to sell this car for about $3,000. I'd bought it for $4,000 AUD, and I'd lined to sell it up for $3,000. And it just catastrophically broke down on me. And that was the second Holden that's broken down on me. So I was 2 for 2. And if you guys ever ask me to take a look at a Holden or drive a Holden again, the answer is no. And that's why I won't drive a Holden, because I've just had terrible experiences with them. At least every other car that I've driven, I've had like semi-good experiences. Holden was just horrible the whole time. So that was the car that just broke down. I ended up selling it to a guy for 500 bucks just for parts. Though the funny thing about the Holden Astra was, this guy came back to me who bought it for parts, like not working as is. He came back to me and said, can I get a refund? And I said, dude, that's not how an as-is sale works. So obviously he thought it was a quick fix. Like he thought the Holden Astra just had something little wrong with it. Though after the devastating Holden Astra, I recouped myself. I said, look, I need a new car after this. I'm not driving a used banger and breaking down on the road. It's one of the most frustrating things when you're driving and your car just craps itself. Really is a frustrating thing. You got to organize a tow truck, you're waiting on the street for hours. If you can avoid it, try to avoid it. And generally the newer your car is, the higher chances you are of avoiding those situations. So I decided to get some finance and get myself a 124 Abarth Spider. Now, this car was so much fun. The Abarth Spider was absolutely like just a fun car. If you want to know what a fun car is, jump in an Abarth 124. You just pop the top, convertible, zip around. It's so good at handling. It's got a 1.4 litre twin turbo, and it's really good on gas too. So you want fuel economy as too in a little car, that thing's got it. But of course, as I said before, the one thing letting that car down was I just needed more space. I started doing all these used parts hunts, collecting parts, and one time it was so bad I had a monitor stacked up behind my head when I was doing a parts hunt. And I knew then, I was like, wow, I've really got to get a bigger car because this just isn't going to work. And a lot of the times I'd be borrowing my friend's 8.6 just because that had more room, much more room actually, than the 124. But then we finally sold the Abarth, and now this leads us to the end game here, the Stinger. And this is where we're at in terms of my car history, what cars I've been driving, and I absolutely love this car now because it does everything all the other cars do except the 124 in terms of handling and driving around like a really fast zip car. It does everything all the other cars do and better. The exterior, that looks absolutely gorgeous. When you look at a Stinger, you got 19-inch mags, Brembo brakes all around. This thing can brake really quickly too. But it's just got that phenomenal look on the outside. I've also added a little Flow Designs body kit on the side skirts, front lip and rear. But you've also got that just beautiful styling that I feel looks better than Audi's similar option. I think it's the S5. And it just looks like better than the Tesla. I mean, I know a lot of guys out there love Teslas, but I think this thing just looks so damn good on the exterior. Then when you jump inside the car, you've got the interior to match. So what Kia have done with this Stinger is just beyond me, because when people hear, like I was dropping off a PC one time and the guy said, I said, I'm in a Kia, mate. And he just said, oh, okay, I see you over there. And he saw me from afar. Then when he got up close to me, he said, whoa, this is a Kia? And I just said, yeah. That's the reaction you're going to get from people with the Stinger, because Kia, I guess, came from the grassroots of making entry-level affordable fuel economic cars. Then they've brought out the Stinger, and this is just a complete 180 for them in terms of how the public is going to perceive their image. Just such a winning car. But the best thing I like about this car is you are getting much more value than you bargain for when you get this car. Like, everything is good. It's got the speed. It's what they call a super saloon. It's got the luxury. It's got the exterior. It's got the looks. It's just got it all. The feature set, the speakers, the handling, the Brembo brakes, the mags, you name it. This thing has got it. And I just, coming out of this review, I cannot say one real negative thing about it for what it is, because you know what you're getting. You know you're getting a bigger car when you get the Stinger. So basically this car is going to appeal to someone who wants it all. They want the 4-door, they maybe got kids, they want a bigger car to fit more people in, they want more room in the boot, but they also want something that will have a lot of street cred, that will have the good boom boom music. Boom boom boom, I want you in my room kind of thing. And it'll also have this, oh, collision warning. There's another little benefit of the Stinger. It's got these, like, it'll tell you if someone's gonna hit you, and if they get close enough, it'll brake and detour the accident for you. But don't rely on that, of course. But these are just many of the features that this beautiful car has to offer. But last thing I'm gonna say about the Kia Stinger is that you've got a 7-year warranty. And this, above all else, makes you feel like, hey, as long as I get this thing serviced with Kia, which to be honest is extremely cheap from what they told me with the servicing, I've actually got to get it serviced soon. The servicing is extremely cheap, and you've then got that 7-year warranty where you got a ticket to just drive for 7 years and not have to worry about your car breaking down, because Kia's got your back. They've even got your back in terms of roadside assistance, so you won't need the RACQ. You can call up Kia anywhere in Australia and they'll tow your car for you if it breaks down. So whatever they've done, it's amazing. Let's get back to the studio and talk a little bit more about cars. And so there it all is with cars, history lane, and Tech Yes City. And I've always, for the life of me, been a car enthusiast. Ever since I was a kid, I remember the first time I saw a car magazine with a Lamborghini and a Ferrari in it. I was just blown away by cars. They were always just in the back of my mind. I've always had a passion for them. And when I went into my teenage days, you couldn't afford much at all, but you still had to get something that was pretty quick. Since then, I've just grown into cars more, where I've worked on them. I worked a lot with car parts, and in ways that sort of, I didn't even know how that transitioned across to tech, but it did. Like a lot of the stuff that I learned with car parts and cleaning them up especially, I've utilized those skills, and also some of the chemicals you see, like WD-40 multi-purpose spray and also brake cleaner, using that on PC parts. I just thought I'd give it a go. And so that in time has sort of given me this attitude of, like, because I'm from Queensland in Australia, and Queenslanders are usually like, she'll be right, mate, just give it a crack. And I've applied that to tech, and a lot of the used parts and PC builds that you see have that same attitude that I've had towards cars. And so always working on cars in the past has given you that sort of just give it a go sort of attitude. And I hope you guys are enjoying the content and enjoying even videos like this, where I just talk about cars and what I like about them. And things that I don't like about cars, I guess coming out of this video, is that when they break down, it is the most frustrating thing ever. You just, especially if you're on a highway and you break down on a highway, I don't want to break. For the life of me now, I've had breakdowns and I just don't want to have them again. That's easily the worst thing about cars. But the most exciting thing, of course, is the torque. When you're putting the foot down and you just sit and you're letting the car just push you back in your seat. And the Stinger does that quite well. So that's another thing that I love about the Stinger too. Though going forward, the Stinger, I remember seeing it back in 2018, and it turned my head. Like, I was like, whoa, what is that? And then I saw the badge and I was like, that's a Kia. And then I started researching and I was like, whoa, okay, what's going on here? And now, fast forward to 2020, I got one. So it's been like, since I saw it in 2018, it's kind of been like my dream car, and I've just worked really hard for it and just gone crazy. And 2020, I got one. So really happy with it. It's just an amazing car, and I couldn't be more excited to finally be driving one. But it comes as a bit of a shock that Kia is now, I think, a top dog in the game. So Korean car manufacturers, they're one to look out for now going forward. And I feel in ways like, I mean, it might be an unpopular opinion, but I feel like Korea is becoming the new Japan in terms of cars going forward. So KDM might be something that you hear going forward, just like JDM has been so dominant in the car scene. And with all that aside, I hope you guys enjoyed today's video. If you did, then be sure to smash that like button for us. Also, let us know in the comment section below what your experiences is with cars. Do you like JDM? Are you more of a European guy, or do you go more towards American muscle? I mean, every enthusiast car owner, I don't care which fence you sit on, it doesn't bother me. Like, if you're a car enthusiast, you're a car enthusiast, and I respect you, man. Like, that is a cool thing. I think everyone in cars has that passion for just driving. And for me personally, I love driving at night, listen to those, like, that new age retro music, and just letting that cool breeze flow through your hair with the windows down. I'm not actually a big fan of aircon. Another thing about the Stinger too is it's got this thing called smart ventilation. So if you don't have your aircon on and your windows are up, after a while it'll just turn like ventilation on automatically. Pretty cool thing. Like, there's all these little features with the Stinger that they're there and you didn't even know you want them, but Kia's thought about that and added them into the car. So top-notch car, absolutely love it. And do drop a comment. Love reading your thoughts and opinions. As always, just like this question of the day, which comes from Orville126, and they ask, hey Brian, Is the infinity mirror affecting thermals in any way, given it looks like a closed off front panel for thermals? So they're talking about this case that we used in this Fall Guys PC build we did. I'll put the link up here. Basically, we only used a 1650, so low power GPU. We didn't really overclock the CPU at all, so we weren't using up much power consumption. I think from the wall I measured like 230 watts in-game, max power consumption. And that was on a power supply that wasn't the best power supply to begin with. So I think with the case itself, it's going to be for a low to mid-range build. The thermals are not going to be good if you put, say, an RTX 2070 Super or a 5700 XT in it. I wouldn't recommend that. If you did do that, I'd recommend maybe getting a water cooler for the CPU, pulling air out the top, and then maybe adding 3 fans in the front. And even then you might have to take the side glass off if things get too hot. So basically I'd keep that case as good as it looks, and with all the bling, I would leave it to just low to mid-range builds. And there's my monitors shutting off in the background, and that's time for me to go. If you've stayed this far, you're loving that content, be sure to hit that sub button, ring the bell. You'll get the tech videos as soon as they drop. Well, now the car videos, but don't expect any more car videos. I don't know. I'm not like, I don't know that much about cars. So for me, it's sort of been a distant time where it's been a big break for me. I mean, I stopped kind of being real enthusiastic about cars in terms of it was a big part of my life after I'd met my ex and had a kid. That was what sort of stopped me from being so involved with it. And I guess you just kind of can't. And then sort of from there, I guess tech and video games, which was always a passion of mine since I was a kid, but that sort of took over more because any free time you got, you would then just play a bit of video games rather than like, hey, I'll just go start up the souped up car and wake up the baby. Can't really do that. So anyway, I'll catch you guys in another tech video very soon. Peace out for now. Bye. So, DADMAN, what do you think of the Kia Stinger?
I love it. And I tell you what, if you got a job to do, you'll get there faster.